Returning now to the studio to further discuss the prospects of indicting the Prime Minister ahead of April 9th elections is attorney and political analyst Gal Babayoff. Gal, thank you so much for coming back with us today.
Thank you for inviting.
All right, so, first of all, let's just start off with, do you think that there's any credence to the accusations that, the dissolving of the government now, the timing of that, had anything to do with delaying, voting on anything or delaying the indictments against Netanyahu?
First things first, the coalition has reached its end due to the fact that they've lost all their political capital running a 61-seat government. It's very, very difficult at times. Prime Minister Netanyahu would not have been able to pass any legislation whatsoever that he wanted to. On the accusations that the timing was political, of course it's political. It was done to meet Prime Minister Netanyahu's personal agenda, that being trying to create the largest political party, the Likud, on April 9th. I do not want to believe that it had any conjunction with the fact that the Attorney General Mandelblit has to submit his recommendations within in the foreseeable future. Okay, so
we'll come back to the indictments for a moment, but again, with the voting and all that other stuff, you mentioned that of course it's political and he wants to return with a stronger Likud, and Netanyahu said much the same thing, but he also said that he's likely going to end up with pretty much the exact same coalition as the core. So what's the point? What's the difference?
One major factor that people have to remember here in Israel right now is the legislation regarding Haredi drafting into the military. That is a very, we'll call it, important point for the Haredi community.
But that bill isn't going anywhere.
It's not going to go anywhere at all. And the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu gave assurances to the Supreme Court that he would legislate by January 15th and could not deliver was one of the better reasons to dissolve the government.
So then what happens in April? So assuming that Netanyahu is right, that the polls are right, he returns with practically the same coalition, what then?
At a starting point of a new government, you start everything all over again. You negotiate the terms of entering the coalition. You negotiate the terms of who receives what seats in government. That is a strong point where Prime Minister Netanyahu can take that to his advantage to try to leverage the Haredi Knesset members to try to be more agreeable with this legislation regarding their drafting.
I see. Okay, now going to the indictments. With Attorney General Mandelblit, he's now been given an 800-page report on the allegations against the Prime Minister. And as you said, up until the election was called, we had assumed that he would come out with a recommendation one way or the other within the next few months. He still can ahead of the elections, but will he? Is it likely?
From a legal point of view, he has his own right. He can submit his recommendations at any given time.
Sure.
Does he want to do that now? That's the major question, because basically the decision of Attorney General Mandelblit will affect the election here in Israel in any way you do it. If he submits his recommendation to indict Prime Minister Netanyahu, it'll thwart the political scales either left or right, sure, according to what everybody wants to see.
Of course. But again, as an Attorney General, doesn't he have maybe an obligation to the state to be forthright and to be efficient and come out with a recommendation sooner than later? Because what happens if he recommends to indict the Prime Minister after he's been reelected?
That is a political debacle that we do not even know how to address, because up until now, any official or elected officials in Israel have been indicted after they've sat in office for a certain time. Former Prime Minister Olmert, former President Katsav, and such and so forth. When we look at the timeline, we've seen that these inquiries, and they've only been inquiries, Prime Minister Netanyahu has not been indicted as of yet. He's not even started any process of indictment, have been going on for years. Mm-hmm. Government has been trying, we'll call it the legislative branch, has been trying to concoct a theory that says that Prime Minister Netanyahu is corrupt and he should leave his office. And certain people in certain political parties are aiming to that fact and hoping that Attorney General Mandelblit will submit his recommendations sooner rather than later. The flip side of that is it'll be an election that will not be... We're talking about an election that might be twisted into a fact that it'll turn into Mandelblit's election or a non-confidence in Prime Minister Netanyahu and not what the people want from a point of ideology.
From a political standpoint. All right, well, that's a fair point. Thank you so much for coming in, Gal.
Thank you.